This video is about finding the right landscape photography composition on a new location, and I want to talk a little bit more about which rules of composition, like the rule of thirds or the golden ratio, or what kind of overlays I am putting on the composition in my head while I'm taking the picture, because that's the actual act of composing an image, and I figured that I never showed it to you. I parked half an hour away from here, and because I just checked Google Maps and haven't checked my hiking app, I was unaware of the fact that the last part of the trail I've chosen is blocked. Therefore, I need to figure out something else, and it's currently 6:40 and the sun is about to rise. I have absolutely no idea what to take a picture of, because when you're in a new location and it's completely dark, turns out it's very hard to scout. I'm at the vantage point at the Grube Cox next to Bergisch Gladbach. If you take a closer look at the weather report, despite the fact that there are low clouds between me and the sun, and odds are pretty high that there won't be a nice sunrise, the complete lack of wind, or the very low amount of wind, is reason enough for me to at least try a nice shot at the reflections. Maybe I see some nice colored trees on the other side of one of the lakes. And since the initial place I wanted to go isn't available because of a blocked road, I try to make the best of it. In about 50 minutes the sun will rise, and I think I found a nice composition over there, and I show you what my camera is seeing. I figured out that on the other side there are beautiful colored trees, and there's even a differently colored tree. I just show you what my camera sees. This is quite a nice view. I am at 70 millimeters and I think it's not wide enough. This is a 4x6 grid, and here you can see whether or not my composition is symmetrical or not. And the thing I am trying to do is using the diagonal line in the mud as a leading line to the lone tree on the top right. And with 70 millimeters I don't think it works, because when I move my camera to the right, we lose a lot of the diagonal line, and there's this tree creeping in. I think this works when the diagonal line is still completely in the frame. I take a few exposures and then I change my lens. I am using my 28 to 75 millimeter lens in order to get somewhere between, let's say, 50 and 60 millimeter. I don't think I need a lot of the wide zoom range, but I definitely need less than 70 millimeter in order to get the leading line to the lone tree on the cliff. I changed the lens, and now you can see what my camera sees. I switched my lens to my 28 to 75 millimeter lens, and after I inspected the composition on my smartphone, I figured that I don't want to go any wider, because the wider I'm getting, the less impact the diagonal line on the composition has. Because when I zoom out to about 50 millimeters, it's just too... It looks nice, but the composition lacks a lot of intimacy, and the composition is just too cluttered, because the bottom and the top and the left and the right, everything is just too messy for my personal taste. And I still take some pictures. I open the aperture a bit, because now with my 28 to 75 millimeter lens, the sharpest spot is way wider than f8 or f11. After I check the exposure, now I finally can talk about the composition I came up with. Since the tree, it's only half a tree anyway, it's fairly easy to cut into the tree, and I think I leave a little bit of the blue sky, and I hope that I can lower the exposure enough so you can see a little bit of the gray clouds. There's this leading line towards the lone tree on the hill, and I think this shot is actually pretty nice. I don't need to do a lot of cleanup in post, and I think this is one of the better ones. I still keep the blue line on the top, because if I would lose the blue line on the top, I would crop into the top of the tree. That's the point of interest, and the only thing that's left to do is double check focus. And I just double check focus by pressing the manual focus button on my remote. And there are 2 layers of trees, and I need to figure out whether or not both trees can be in focus with a single exposure. Maybe I need to stop down. I just fiddle around with my camera a little bit, and we go to the next spot. I'm going to show you what my camera sees. I'm way closer to the shore, and the interesting part is that the view on the trees on the other side is very, very cluttered, and I could go for something like a... maybe it works. I go for something like a natural frame. I use the clutter that is obstructing the view to the trees on the other side of the lake as a natural frame. And while I think, in my honest opinion, this is an overdone trope, and I have never managed to pull it off in a way that is enhancing the actual image, I give it a try. Because the thing I don't like about this technique in particular is that the ratio of the natural frame to the actual image and to the actual subject most of the time is half of the entire image. And here, in this view, you can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. More than half of the entire frame is filled with the natural frame. And I try to zoom in a little bit in order to reduce the amount of natural frame. I try to align the axis of the mirror image in the center of my frame. Then I adjust the exposure, because we're currently way overexposed, and I try to just reduce the ISO to ISO 100 again, because it's getting brighter and brighter. And I still am able to reduce the shutter speed until my histogram tells me that nothing clips anymore. And I try to go for multiple exposures, because I definitely need to stack the focus in order to make this cluttered frame work. Okay, I go for one exposure for the foreground. I go for another one and now I just go for the trees on the other side. This works surprisingly well, but I am not completely sold on this idea, but you can post in the comments whether or not you like this trope. Or you can tell me whether or not you ever pulled this off using a natural frame inside your picture to frame your subject. I just used my longer lens and I'm at about 120 millimeter, and I show you what my camera sees. And the reason why I stayed here was simply because the treetops on the other side are hit by light pretty dramatically right now, and I think this makes a great picture. It's the only lake on my way back, as you can see here, where I can have a clear view on the trees on the other side being hit by the light. And as you can see in my camera, the thing I'm trying to do is I was trying to align the hole in the shoreline with the rule of thirds. So the intersection between the lower thirds and the right thirds should be right there where there is no shoreline left. And I wanted to show the reflection of the trees, but it's impossible to frame the reflection in a nice way. And all that's left to do is set the exposure in a way that nothing is clipping. So I can just reduce the exposure a little bit, because the treetops are quite vibrant. I want to preserve all the colors and all the information. I don't want those highlights to clip, because those highlights look pretty beautiful. And in post-production I still have a little bit leeway, because I am shooting in 4:3, and if I go back to 3:2, I got a little bit of wiggle room in my composition, so I can adjust the height of the composition by a few centimeters in post. So this is actually the reason why I like to shoot by 4:3, because you get wiggle room, and I like to have some wiggle room, because sometimes you have to act fast, and if you act fast, sometimes you make mistakes, and with some wiggle room it's easier to not make any mistakes. I found the nicest tree, and I was really struggling in how to frame it correctly. I got lucky because there weren't many people walking their dogs until now, and while I was interrupted filming and talking to a nice stranger who asked me whether or not I found the lake on the other side, I found this particular scene. And I was seeing the line next to the tree, and I was seeing the tree, and everything is golden, and the sun is really hitting the trees on the other side of the lake. But I was struggling so much to frame this tree in the correct way. But then I figured just zoom all the way in, and it pretty much solved itself. I'm at 250 millimeters. I used my ND filter. I'm at a 4-second exposure in order to remove all the riffles, and I really wanted to emphasize the uniqueness of this current scene, because all those golden trees on the other side is something I haven't seen in quite a while. And I reduced the amount of subjects in the frame, and I think that this picture is my favorite so far for this day. After fine-tuning this composition, I really figured that in autumn photography you don't necessarily need a nice sunrise, and I was a little bit disappointed in the last weeks, because every time I got up early in order to take a picture of the sunrise, there was none. And in autumn photography you don't necessarily need a nice sunrise. All you need is a little bit of light and a lot of luck in order to take a nice picture. It's getting later and later, and it's already 9:10. I hope today you learned a little bit about how to compose a picture. I'm going to call it a day and clean up my stuff. I think my favorite shot was the last one with the blurry water and the lone tree with the shoreline. And you can post a comment and tell me which one you like most. And if you like the video, you can like the video. And if you want to stay in touch and if you want to learn more about landscape photography, you can subscribe to my channel. Bye.